Interesting and entertaining paper there. Moving on with the theme of Doctor in Religious Education, we come next to Holly Jordan, who's in her third year of PhD at Virginia Tech University, and she's given us a paper today on the impossible hit, Satan, Hell, and Teaching Doctor Who.
Thank you very much. Just give me 1 second to get my PowerPoint up. You'd like that. Phone book back here. Okay, I just wanted to start by saying thank you to Andrew for putting this together and for answering my 500 emails about travel and putting this paper together. Also, thank you to everybody who helped make this event possible. Before I begin, I'd just like to remark that a full copy of this paper is found on my website, and it's actually going to be at the bottom of each of the subsequent slides. So if you have any feedback or you want to look at it more closely, you've got like your PDA right now, it's there. I'm going to leave it up for about 2 weeks before I take it down. So if anything sparks later, I am hoping to turn this into an article, so any feedback would be greatly appreciated. By way of introduction, like was said, my name is Holly Jordan, and I'm working on my PhD at Virginia Tech in a program called ASPECT, which is an acronym for the Alliance for Social, Political, Ethical, and Cultural Thought, which is just a really fancy way of saying we're in an interdisciplinary program. And we're between political science, religion, history, and philosophy, and we all pick a major area and a minor area to work on a project together. So I'm quite happy there. My colleagues were really actually very supportive of me coming to this conference, so much so that this showed up outside of my office on the chalkboard that we usually have notes to each other. So obviously I'm going to get some really good feedback from them, hopefully, when I get back as well. Just to kind of let you guys know my own connection to Doctor Who. Please try not to throw Rotten Tomatoes at me for this, but I originally got into it from the reboot and have watched all of the reboot and have been slowly trying to get the back catalog. About 2 years ago when I started my PhD, I was in a semester with 3 book a week classes, and I was going nuts, having to read 700 pages a week. So I'm like, what can I distract myself with? And everybody's like, you gotta watch Doctor Who. So I did. We've since caught up on the Aztecs, which I got really excited. Like, I know what that is. And so we've watched the first series with William Hartnell, The 3 Doctors, The 5 Doctors, the movie. And on the way over here, we were actually listening to some of the audio plays of the 8th Doctor adventures. So I kind of got bits and pieces, and I'm working on it. One of the first episodes that really stuck out to me, honestly, though, was The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. I have a master's in religious studies, predominantly Hellenistic Judaism, and that's what I did my master's thesis on. So I've been kind of stuck teaching the intro to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam courses throughout my master's and PhD level work. So I started thinking, oh, I could probably use this in the classroom somehow. And it's not the first time I've done this. My dad and my aunt are huge Star Trek fans, and so I've been watching those since, I can still not see over the podium, but a couple years ago. And I use that in the classroom a lot. I've used the 6th Star Trek movie. I've also used an episode from the series Enterprise called Cogenitor when teaching Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Women to kind of compare how do we deal with more genders when we go out into the future, and how do we try to not do the same sort of cultural relativism, there we go, as was seen with the Aztecs and Barbara when going out and encountering these new cultures with new genders. I've also used an episode of Sliders from the 2nd season to talk about patriarchy versus matriarchy. What would the Earth look like if women had been in charge instead of men? And ironically enough, now that we know her future career, it's Hillary Clinton that's the president in that episode instead of Bill. So the students are like, oh wait, that's weird, because they don't remember the Clinton presidency at this point. So moving on to how I use Doctor Who, first in fall 2012, and then again in summer 2013, I used The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit as my final exam. I hate exams that are just cumulative regurgitations of things they've already been tested on. So usually I try to pick up the final exam project that has them take that wealth of knowledge from the semester and apply it to something else. I figure, what better than Doctor Who? Picking up something that is just beyond the reaches of our technology, the kinds of questions they're going to have to be asking in their lives, and applying Judaism, Christianity, and Islam to it. And obviously these episodes are kind of ready-made to do that with all of their wealth of religious references. So I thought, why not do this? Why not have them try to look at the problems of good and evil, try to get these 21st century, generally very secular students, at least at my university, to think about religious themes in everyday life. So some of the things that I've noticed in these episodes is that they really do explore multiple themes from Abrahamic tradition without really invoking one religious tradition over the other. In the second episode, we get a rare glimpse into the Doctor's own personal beliefs. He states, I believe, it's really hard not to go into tenant voice here, so I'm gonna try. I believe I haven't seen everything. I don't know, it's funny, isn't it? The things you make up, the rules, and sorry, I'm already quoting another paper. If that thing had said it came beyond the universe, I believe it, but before the universe, that's impossible. It doesn't fit into my rules. Still, that's why I keep traveling. That's why I keep traveling. Be proven wrong. Thank you, Ida. This is what I want my students to do, to take those preconceived notions that they have, either about the religions we've studied or from their own religious traditions, and again, try to deal with the very real problems that are presented in this episode. So, what's interesting in addition to that is while the Doctor still has very definite beliefs about the structures and the origins of the universe, he still at least slightly opens the possibility that he hasn't seen everything, and that he could learn something that goes against those beliefs. But the whole episode ends up concluding without answering any questions, which is great as a teacher, because I'm like, what do you guys want to do with that? So I liked the end of the episode because it's so open-ended. People can really come at it from wherever they're from, rather than being kind of forced to conclude something about the episodes. David Tennant himself actually elaborates on this feeling of aporia that you get at the end of the episode, stating, the Doctor does get down into the pit, and there seems to be something beyond his understanding. In the end, he chooses not to understand. I think the Doctor is genuinely shaken by the fact that this creature seems to be everything he's denying it is. At no time does the Doctor deny the existence of this impossible planet, and he's there. But he doesn't dwell on what this reality means, especially within his own worldview. This incongruity is exactly what I wanted my students to focus on. So, for me and for my students, it seems, it was the more subtle portions of these episodes that became the most enlightening. Between the lighting, costuming, and the set itself, all parts of the episode add to the feeling that the impossible planet is all too quickly becoming the hell of the Abrahamic traditions. For instance, Davies, the former showrunner, describes the nature of the set. He states, I think one of James Strong's greatest feats on this is to get smoke all the time. It's like hell is underneath of them. In every shot almost, there is some sort of smoke rising up in the background or the foreground. And I love that, it's so atmospheric. Many of the students' papers actually picked up on this, and I did not prompt them on this in any way. Both of the Doctor Who Confidential episodes that are paired with these two paid great attention to the amount of time and effort it took to make every single detail of the planet kind of pop. The color of the paints chosen, the wiggly set pieces, the kind of almost destructive nature of walking through it. You could have broken any part of the set at any time. And that constant feeling of claustrophobia. They're going through ducts. They're going through very small, cramped hallways. So the episode is ripe with these kind of visual references. But rather than go in and continue to give kind of my feedback on this, I thought it would be really better to take quotes from my students' papers themselves. And when I wrote them about this, several weeks ago, I was like, can I use parts of your paper in this thing I'm going to do in England about Doctor Who? They're like, oh my god, yes! Luckily, I did get permission from all of these students. And to just start off, the titles of the papers alone got really fun. I always tell my students, I'm like, don't give me paper final title, final paper for religion, because, if your thesis is crap, that's literally the only way I might know what you meant to write your paper about. So I didn't tackle anything. And they really took the bait this time. Each time I showed the episodes, only a couple had actually seen the episodes in question, and only a few more had seen Doctor Who in general. We used to have it on PBS when I public broadcasting when I was a kid, like the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Doctors predominantly, but they haven't showed it in years. So very few of them had seen the back catalog or even really knew about the back catalog, and most of them kind of knew about David Tennant because he was that guy in Harry Potter, right? So yeah, so very few really had any idea what was going on, which I kind of liked. I gave them a handout with some like very basic details. The Doctor is an alien, and he has a ship, and he likes to travel with people, or sometimes small robot dogs, but most of the people, you know. And so they got the like a little bit that they needed, and I asked them, I'm like, is this accessible? If you've never seen the show before, did you find that you were able to follow along or anything? And they agreed, yeah. So these 2 episodes kind of not being a part of the kind of episodic nature of that season, they're kind of standalone in a lot of ways, makes them work as an assignment as well. So some of the questions I put on the handout were things like, what is the significance of the fact that the planet in these episodes, which revolves around a black hole, is, according to the episode, scientifically impossible, yet still exists? What does this say about the afterlife and whether that exists? Additionally, what does it mean that Satan has become merely an idea? Does that make him any less real? So I asked the students kind of these questions in advance. We talked a little bit about it, and then the way the assignment worked after that was that they had a week and a half between the last class and our final exams to just turn it in online. So these ended up being short response papers. What was really great reading the papers is that it became abundantly clear that I was dealing with students from very religious backgrounds outside of even the Abrahamic faith. Who not only interpreted the work from the assigned coursework, but also from their personal beliefs and worldview, which was great because it added kind of a deeper level of understanding than just, we read about this, and this was an episode. Like, they really made it almost narrative in some of their responses. So, using their point of view as newcomers to the show, and specifically looking for connections to religious material covered in class, what follows from the rest of the presentation is their unique take on these episodes. So when the Doctor and Rose arrive on the planet in the opening moments of the episode, they find, at the very least, something improbable. And I really liked the idea that Jack had maybe was a drinking game, but I don't know that Virginia Tech would allow that in the classroom, but it might have made the essays more fun. So one of my students, Dijon, noted that heaven is portrayed as a land in the sky, where angels play the roles of protectors and messengers. No such land has been found. Planes fly through the clouds regularly with no collision with heaven or angels. Spaceships and rockets have left the orbit and returned with no evidence of such a joyous place. Just as the planet revolving around the black hole exists in the impossible planet, despite being scientifically impossible, many believe that heaven exists despite being scientifically unproven. In this way, the Doctor and Rose have to admit the planet's existence, regardless of how unbelievable it is. And like those who believe in an afterlife, Rose and the Doctor can only have this belief through, ultimately, faith. Deep in the pit at the center of the planet resides a chained-up beast, which begins wreaking havoc on the ship, primarily through infecting Toby, the crew's archaeologist. It seems that of all the crew members, Toby is the most susceptible to the beast's control. One interpretation of why Toby is able to be so easily controlled was presented by my student, Brian. He states, Toby is the example of humans acting individually. We see Toby fight against his crewmates, seek to prevent the crew from finding the demon, walk in space without a suit for protection or air, and host the beast's mind as it seeks to escape the planet. Toby's resistance against possession by the beast is impossible because he is not strongly bonded with the rest of the crew. He spends long hours working alone, is often asked to do the menial chores on ship, and is the writer of the Welcome to Hell on the wall on the sanctuary base. The implication is that his isolation is what made him an easy target. While not necessarily a religious interpretation for Brian's comments, Brian does bring together an idea quite common amongst many religions, that religions cannot exist without people. People who come together under a common belief with common shared goals and practices. Early in The Impossible Planet, the section of the spaceship housing the TARDIS collapses, causing the ship to plummet into the depths of the planet, seemingly lost forever to Rose and the Doctor. In a particularly insightful comment, my student Taylor stated, "The Doctor and Rose being stuck on the space station is very similar to how many people perceive hell, in that once you get there, you cannot leave. The Doctor, who has spent his life traveling in a stolen ship, is suddenly grounded in an impossible place." She adds, "The Epic of Gilgamesh gives us an insight into how the afterlife was viewed in ancient times. It referred to hell as, quote, the house which none leave who have entered it," end quote. The idea of hell being eternal is still present in many religions today, including Christianity. By losing their ship, the Doctor and Rose are trapped on the hell-like planet, and there is nothing they can do to get them off. Being stuck in an undesirable location for an extended period of time is a very terrifying idea, whether it is a year or for all of eternity. Eternity is just one of the many concepts that make hell so terrible and undesirable. While the episode with the Doctor and Rose, while the episode ends with the Doctor and Rose going off into their next adventure in space and time, the fear and isolation that they experienced during the episode was palpable. The majority of the Satan Pit, the second episode, focuses on the beast in the pit, with the Doctor, Ida, and the rest of the crew attempting to figure out what it is. The question comes down to this: what is the creature in the pit? Is it real? Is it Satan? Is it merely an idea? My student Nahar attempts to answer these questions, stating, "Belief as a theme in these episodes provides us with two possibilities under which something can exist. The first is that seeing something in its physical form, be it a being or an event, gives us reason to believe in its existence. However, in Doctor Who, we see the opposite of this. Belief is instead characterized by an idea, something that takes over the mind despite its physical form. We see evidence of this phenomenon in the pit when the Doctor describes his curiosity about what lay below, even though he knew that it may be dangerous. It is only his lack of belief in the devil as something that existed before time that saves him." My student Emma also adds, "Because the beast is an idea, does this make him any less real? Are hope and compassion any less real just because they are ideas? Rage and pain and loss and fear give the beast a foothold. An idea is as formidable as, or even more so, than a physical representation. While events unravel, the Doctor is able to convince the crew that the beast is an idea, one that plays on the most basic of fears. The fact that the beast needed the Doctor and the crew to escape is a representation that the only true power the beast had is that of the power which would give him through belief. The beast in these episodes was not destroyed by the Doctor and Rose sending it into the black hole. He was destroyed by them choosing not to believe in his power over them." So throughout the semester, we had tackled many concepts, often contradictory, between the three Abrahamic religions. For some practitioners of these religions, these concepts of sin, hell, and death are so real that they are believed to manifest physically in these religious practices. You get stigmata, the belief that sickness is due to one's sinful nature, the actual physical place of hell is described and recounted. And so some students struggle to place these kind of high-level concepts within their own worldviews that may or may not have included them. Yet, like the Doctor and Rose and the crew of the Torchwood Archive, all were able to use their own humanity to overcome the challenges presented by mere ideas. Well, except Toby. But Scooty's death was really Toby's fault, so yeah, the students had one up on him, I guess. So we get some really great feedback from the students after this. All the crew, Dr. Rose, their faith's been rattled through the course of the episodes, depending on where their faith comes from. So all the humans and the Doctor are left with is what Brian F. tells us in his paper, again taking us slightly away from religion and giving us a more humanist, human-centered explanation. He was my baby's self-avowed atheist in my class and purposely trying to write all his papers discounting everything I taught him. So they were really fun papers to read because of that, because he really tried incredibly hard to back it up. But he states, the Doctor says he believes in just one thing. I believe in Rose. Despite his experience with demigods and would-be gods, the only things he believes in is the human race. Humans are the gods, Brian states. So it wasn't a god that forced the humans into prison for all eternity. It was a group of ancient humans. While the Doctor is looking at the pictograms, he comments, quote, "History of some big battle, man against beast. This group of humans is the one that overcomes evil for the benefit of the society." Over time, it would seem this battle turned into a mythology about God, but the point is made that humans overcome evil. The Doctor is clearly in awe of this turn of events, as he quite admires humans already. One conclusion that can be easily drawn from this episode is that since the devil exists, then logically God exists. But Brian continues, however, the Doctor Who universe doesn't generally have these kind of very black and white supernatural elements. The source of this beast is left undefined, but even the inexplicable orbit and the gravity tunnel that allows the spaceship to land on the planet were explained by a massive energy source. The Doctor may have bad science sometimes, but it doesn't generally have supernatural elements as the final explanation. I don't, again, necessarily agree with him completely, but what's interesting is that if everything in these episodes could be linked to these kind of scientific explanations, and not to gods, as Brian would suggest, then what would make the episode linked to religion at all? Why use that motif if you're just going to talk about a big bad in the sky and some way of defeating it? If the writers simply wanted to scare us, they could have gone quite a bit further, and they have in other episodes, to doing just that. So why hell? My student Peter asked the same question, concluding that unlike other forms of evil and horror, the fear represented in these episodes strikes a common nerve in the audience. Some people are scared of mummies, some people are scared of ghosts, but hell, whether you are a believer or not, is still kind of a visual that, regardless of Abrahamic faith or not, you're familiar with. And you know someone that is scared of it, even if you're not. So it seems reasonable, Peter states, to assume that the writers of these episodes have a decent knowledge of at least one of the Abrahamic faiths. If they wanted to just make a scary episode about the existence of a powerful demon captured in a rock hurtling through space, they could have done it just as easily without the religious parallels. The fear of the idea of the devil, commentary on religious traditions, and the power of God were included on purpose to make people take a deeper look at their religion and their interpretation of the religions of others. The language of death, Satan, and hell permeates Western culture. Even if one is not religious, these images are still present in our consciousness, much like the beast appears across civilizations and galaxies in both of the episodes. So after presenting each of these episodes, one of my students came up to me after class and was like, "That was scary!" And she was actually annoyed with me for not having warned the class. She even said, "I thought this was a kid's show." So when I asked her why it scared her so much, she responded, because the episodes accurately made manifest all of her childhood nightmares about the devil, having learned about it in Sunday school and then had these nightmares. She said it was like watching one of those nightmares. And in this way, I don't think her response is all that unique, which is why I think the episodes work so well, and they're so thought-provoking. If I ever had the honor of meeting Davies, I think he'd probably be quite proud to hear that this student was so terrified. He was really going for this. When interviewed, he said of the devil in the Satan pit, quote, "We wanted the most devilish devil, something that could have imprinted his iconography into the universe, the horns, the redness. At the same time, I wanted it to be very muscular, very primal stuff, and that's what it taps into." So well done, Mr. Davies. You managed to scare at least one young adult in Southwest Virginia. So just to kind of wrap it up, the value, I think, of this assignment showed in the quality of the students' responses. They got one shot to watch the episodes. A few of them told me they went home and watched it on Netflix a couple more times, but generally speaking, most of them only watched it just the once with no prior knowledge. And they still came up with some really great stuff in that initial pass. These final essays do not read simply as book reports or summaries. Each student underwent careful analysis of the episodes that remarked upon the exact points the producers and actors were trying to convey. Two scholars, Adam Pisani and Murray Lee, explained that these religious episodes stand as one of many religious episodes within the new 7 series of Doctor Who. Referring to both the Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit, in addition to the Torchwood episode End of Days that we talked about earlier, they explained that, quote, "These obvious biblical references, death for our sins and resurrection, again signal something of a shift and illustrate a new willingness to play with and indeed deploy religious themes, while never dispensing with the secular scientific underpinning of the series. Davies, a remarkably self-avowed atheist, explained that part of why he wanted to do the Satan pit was to, quote, take a rational man and challenge his beliefs, end quote. Davies clearly did this through the character of the Doctor, but I would argue he also challenges the audience to confront the same problems. David Tennant, when looking back on the episode, remarks, "I like the idea that in this episode it's all left fairly unresolved. We never find out if this was a devil or the devil or just a big beast. We don't know." End quote. This is why Impossible Planet and Satan Pit work so well for this assignment. By leaving the answers open-ended, the episode gives students ample room to explore the main themes of Western religion in a way that is meaningful for them. And I would argue it's easier to do this now than, say, if this episode had been done prior, as was stated in some of the remarks in the end of the last panel, because the show has gone global, especially with the new seven series reboot. You are having to tell these stories to a much broader cultural base. And so I think some of these religious episodes that are more indicative of the new series, and from what I've gathered from the old series, is that they are able to draw on more myths and things because they're talking to more people. They have people with more varied backgrounds and they can pull myths in different ways. To be fair, my students' papers at times read more like responses to a Rorschach test than actual responses to the episode. But I would argue that honing the ability of applying pre-existing knowledge to a new situation is valuable for any student. Simply regurgitating names and dates on a test or completing short answers or essays with clearly objective answers stifles student creativity and wastes their time. By learning to apply pre-existing religious knowledge to new situations, even if those situations come in the form of science fiction, or in my case especially, if they come in the form of science fiction, I think students become better able to interact with others of different religious traditions and faiths, to be more aware of world travelers because they recognize different cultural traditions, and to become better representatives of their own faith because they've actually taken the time to question it a little bit. Thank you very much.
Really interesting paper.